Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meyerside Chats. Today we have Adam Mizel, who's a seasoned C-level executive and investor who's spent 25 years bridging leadership and capital. He served as CEO, COO, CFO, and head of growth across public and private companies in media, entertainment, financial services, and digital industries. He founded 3 companies, helped manage more than $5 billion in investment assets as a general partner, raised over $3 billion in public and private capital, and served on more than 40 corporate boards. With that rare combination of entrepreneurial execution, public company leadership, deep governance experience, and large-scale capital strategy, Adam stepped beyond the boardroom to focus on rebuilding trust and strengthening civic engagement across divided communities with his organization, Us United. Adam, welcome.
Thank you. I'm impressed with. I love my background now. I was like, you made that beautiful.
Oh, great. I strive to please and impress.
Well done.
It's great to have you on. We have a lot in common. We're both entrepreneurs. We're both been in the nonprofit world. We've both raised money. We both care a lot about uniting people. This podcast, as you know, has been dedicated to understanding why people can't get along and trying to make that happen. So it's really exciting to have you on and understand more about Us United. And why don't you tell me a little bit about Us United, and then we'll get into some really fun questions.
You got it. So Us United, to start, is a movement to build unity in America by giving all of us Americans the tools we need to reunite our country. Right? Sounds simple, not easy, right? It took us 40, 50 years to get to the ditch we are now in. We are not going to get out of that in a day or a week or in a year. But I don't think we need 40 years to get back out of it either, but we certainly need some time to go to process and work through that. And sort of the problem that we identified, we said one of the biggest challenges to what we call unity, and we'll come back to defining that a little bit, is that most of us live and work in social media in ever shrinking bubbles. And outside of those bubbles, we categorize and then we label. None of that is bad. That is how we're processing an incredibly complex world. But I always ask, and I'd ask you, have you ever sympathized or compromised with a label?
Yeah. Sympathized or compromised with a label that someone has called me?
Or with people. If you say, that's a Republican, that's a Democrat, that's a this, that's a that. That's not a person, that's a label. Are you going to find sympathy, or are you going to find a way to compromise?
No, I mean, by nature of it, it's a subjective, internalization and self-projection very often.
Right. And so I think the way technology, the way our culture has evolved, that's where most of us find ourselves, trying to figure out how to deal with these labels and these categories versus these other humans. And so a big chunk of what we have focused on at Us United is how do we break people out of those bubbles, and how do we change culture in doing that? Because at the core, we have a culture that elevates and rewards division, fighting, anger. It's a lot more fun to watch, right? I mean, people, it's the classic cliche, right? If it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead on the news, right? It's the same thing. And we have to change culture if we're going to make that happen differently, because that culture rewards that behavior and we all watch it, and technology reinforces it, all the things we all know. And so Us United was really created to say, how do we get people out of bubbles? How do we change culture? And we really said, how do you need a brand of unity? Similar question. Think about brands to you today that represent division. I bet you have a long list, starting with Republican and Democrat. Okay, tell me the brand that's out there that's the unity brand.
Right, there's not. I suppose the best thing closest to it would be something like the Independent Party or or the Forward Party that was trying to gain some traction. Andrew Yang,
Mhm. Mhm.
I
I would
get his name
argue any political
right.
party by definition cannot be a unity brand. The minute you step
Yeah,
into politics, it is not supposed to be unity. There, I mean, leave aside the breakdown that there isn't an ability to find common ground and compromise, but
yeah.
politics isn't about,
Good point.
right? So part of back to Us United, part of what we said is we need to create a brand, back to culture, back to bubbles, that says stands for unity, that people can rally behind the concept of unity, the concept of a collective goal, the concept of teamwork, the concept of respect. And we can go on and on and on. If you have that, then you can maybe get to politics or any issue you want down the road outside of Us United. But we really said we have to do that. Brand, culture, connecting people, both digital, real world. And we do a lot of things and a lot of resources and tools against that, which we could absolutely get into. But that doesn't exist. And if you're going to
Yeah,
confront media and politics, both of whom are invested and rewarded by division, it's just what it is. It's not, again, I'm no bad or good about it. That's their economic and power incentives. How are you going to do that without a brand, without storytelling, without media, without examples, without
yeah,
leadership, without culture change, without
yeah,
engagement? And that's where Us United comes in.
yeah. Yeah, it's a real challenge. The incentive structures for division are immense,
Immense.
and it yeah, and there's a flywheel that exists between any player in government or politics at all and the government representatives themselves, somewhere between money, power, influence, jobs,
Right,
keep my job or get rid of my job, right? Like
right,
if I
right,
mean,
right.
how money, the way money flows in this revolving door, it's remarkable, and it's almost unstoppable in a lot of ways because it's at every level and everyone's it's like beyond lobbying, right? It's like if you're a small nonprofit and you want a government contract or you want to get some sort of policy influence, you're in the game. You've
Mhm.
now began playing that game. So, and I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong with people trying to play, but the incentive structures create so many tributaries, where it's just hard to break.
Right.
So, um, I've studied now why this has happened. Like, why can't we get people out of this mindset? And one of the things I've sort of come up with, I'm excited to ask you. I've asked so many guests on the show this question,
Mhm.
um, and believe it or not, I get radically different answers. But I think we have to first have the same lexicon. And if we have, for example, the definition of the word fact, right?
Mhm.
When you say something's a fact, or your favorite congressman says something that is a fact, or your least favorite congressman says something that is a fact, it means very different things to all of these people. So let me ask you, how do you define what a fact is?
Hmm. Good question. Um, I would say I define a fact as a data-driven, objective statement that can tie back to true data, true information, true across an array of independent sources. So a fact is something that you can validate with data and not be subjected to opinion. And the examples you gave, if you're relying upon a person to give you a fact, we're incapable of that on many levels because our interpretation of fact is driven by our views, our opinions, our brains, right? And so what I assert as a fact is going to be a combination of information and my opinion. Data-driven information give you facts, right? That's where you have to go. And it's never that black and white. I'm making it incredibly simple because between what I just said and what you said is a significant gray area. And that's where it's incumbent upon all of us to do our research, to do our work, to not just accept what someone says to be a fact or not to be a fact. It's just, we have to do that. And I think that's where facts come to bear. I love Steve Ballmer has something called USA Facts. I don't know if you've seen this, but,
Yes,
and you
actually, I'm
probably
on it.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that's an example of those are facts. There's data, there's an analysis to reach, here is a fact. With that
Yeah.
fact, your opinion of what it can mean and what you can do with it goes in a lot of
Yes.
different directions.
Sure. Okay. So a fact, but it's not necessarily absolute truth, right? Or it,
Very few things that are absolute truths.
absolute. Okay. So even a fact. So just so you and I are even talking about facts the same way,
Yeah.
right? Because this will evolve. The a fact is not necessarily truth.
Well, a fact is a data point. It's an information point, and it's going to move and evolve as new data and new information emerge. Right?
Okay.
A,
Right.
a fact. I love this, by the way. This is fun. A fact, I would argue today, is based on the data and the information we have today. Yesterday or Friday, there was a fact that tariffs were set at various rates and were at the discretion of the president of the United States. Friday afternoon, that fact changed with a new fact. The Supreme Court determined that the Constitution did not support and allow that authority to make those tariffs, which to that point were facts. Those
Yeah.
tariffs were facts.
Sure.
Saturday night, Friday night to Saturday to Monday, they became different because a new fact happened. So facts will change.
Right. Facts can change. Yeah. They evolve. Um, and like you said, there's very few absolute truths, right? What, being born, death, the fact that we breathe, that we exist, I mean, and even people will have ways of debating that, right? And be like, well, we don't really exist. Our cells are made up of 99% air or whatever, you're like, okay, we're not really matter at all. Multidimensional, we could, but
we could go for a
there's
long time.
a very long
Sure.
time, but let's just say, okay, so I think we're aligned on that. How do we convince people that the things they watch and hear from a person that they like watching on the news is just a reporter of information, mostly of hearsay, many telephone links down the chain, and no one was in the room really where it happened? So how do we determine what a fact is? And this is sort of where we say the intellectual humility component, which I think would be so critical for people uniting, is like, if you could just say to yourself, maybe I don't have every piece of information, right? Or I didn't get all the information, or there's more to the story than perhaps I understand. I think that's where we need to go. But right now we're still at like people arguing over what a fact. I mean, the difference of what they think a fact is.
I'm going to back it up and go from experiences that I've had recently to try to address your question, right? So as we discussed, I spent 2.5 months this summer in a purple and white pickup truck, driving across the country, meeting with sheriffs in every state that were in our Sheriff Unity network and thousands of everyday Americans, and had a film crew capturing a bunch of this content. And similar to what you just asked me is how do I define a fact? I asked everyone almost at the beginning of our conversation, what does unity mean to you? How do you define unity? For the same reason you asked me, how do you get to a plane, understand where people come in a plane? What was incredibly surprising and powerful to me was that almost everybody used some subset of, I would say, the same 12 or 15 words to define unity: respect, trust, empathy, compassion, teamwork, patience, listening, go on. You can't fix a problem if you don't define it the same way, which is kind of what you're, I think, driving towards. As it related to this question of unity, Americans defined it the same way. I thought that surprised me actually a lot.
Yeah.
And what I also heard from a vast majority was a belief we are not as divided as presented by politicians and by media. And even those who thought we were didn't want us to be. So there was a common desire to do that. Next to where you're going, consistent blame for that on, in particular, media, both traditional and social media. And to a T, almost everyone said, I know I'm not getting facts. They use those words. I know that I'm not hearing truth. I'm hearing opinion. I know I'm being manipulated. And now the answer for most then is, ignore and unplug from it rather than deepening time, energy, research. And some of that's personality, time people have. But I was very positively impressed by what I would describe as the common sense of our fellow countrymen, right? It's a little bit, you often hear when people run for president and they travel the country, how they changes them. I get it, right? You walk away with an appreciation that there is a lot more common sense and a lot more thoughtfulness than you hear in the media, right? Because the media is here, you're hearing 15%, really less, but 15% on each sides who scream the most loudly, who are the most divisive, who challenge facts the most because they're making a financial living or an emotional living on fighting, on divisiveness and discord. And so I think part of the answer to your question really is you have to step back and say, who are we really talking about? And realize that most don't fall to the trap you're describing. And when they do, I mean, this gets to things that I found as a powerful tool. And I started this road trip thinking I was a listener and a reporter. Within there's a bunch of things that happened that changed that very quickly, but certainly a couple of weeks in, I realized I was a part of that story to be told. And people started asking me, well, what do you do? Like, because what people all wanted was hope. They're like, you showing up in a purple and white pickup truck? Oh my God, you're giving me hope. Like, if you're doing that, maybe there is hope we can do something. And I'm sitting there saying, hey, I'm today in New Jersey and in Texas and in Alabama and in Iowa. This is what I heard. And it's the same thing you're saying. And people are like, no one tells me that. I thought I was alone in believing this. I need hope. I need stories. I need inspiration. And hope, I think, is one of the most powerful words in the English language. And what I heard from across the board really was, and then people are like, I try to talk to the other side. They don't listen. They want to fight with me. So you back it up and you say, well, what does that mean you're doing? And they would describe, someone would say this and I'm telling them they're wrong and this is why. And I say, stop. If I tell you you're wrong, are you going to listen to me? Is that going to change your opinion on anything? I'm like, no. Okay. So start with truly listen. Truly listen. And don't comment in listening. Ask questions, right? If you don't understand or you don't even agree with what someone's saying, ask them a question about why they believe that, what their experience has been, and listen. And then the third thing I would say is if or when you want to share an opinion or challenge a perspective, don't start with, hey, I don't agree or you're wrong. This is what I think is right. Share an experience. So we are all humans by default, by genetics, by biology and evolution, are storytellers. It's a painting on the cave walls to, today. If you share a personal experience that may be different than what someone's describing their beliefs to be, it could be yours, your friends, your parents, your children, your at work, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be your direct experience, but you're sharing experience. That's a fact, by the way. No one you're talking to can tell you your lived experience is wrong because you lived it. Right? And that person will respond to your experience with a different and more open mind than you're wrong and this is why, versus, hey, and I could share with you some stories of very profound when I did that on this trip, and I'm happy to do that. But those were the tools I started to bring, because if I share an experience with you, you may not agree or you may not tell me, but I bet you when I walk away, whatever your opinion was, my experience being different than your opinion in this example, will change. Even if it's 5 or 10%. You moved 5 or 10% closer to where I'm thinking, and hearing your experience, I moved at least 5 or 10% closer to you. Sometimes it could be much, much closer. That's what Americans wanted to do and are looking for help in doing, because you're not getting that from the media, traditional or social.
No. Well, I think there's this component of, because the media puts this, let's just say the algorithm puts the 3 to 5 seconds of the most outrageous stuff in front of your face the most, you're bound to, you have this image of what those people look like.
Mm-hmm.
right? Them, the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get this in, oh, I can't believe, oh, right?
Right.
And then when you speak to someone who
Right.
who triggers all of the what you've just watched, the 2 seconds they talk, you've watched 2 months worth of content in the over the last, whatever years of just like watching this brainwashy stuff. You go, if that individual then says, "Oh, I'm going to apply the values that I see of that terrible stuff to you because you like, let's say, Donald Trump or Joe Biden." And now you carry all of the negative weight of the months of terrible content that I've watched. When I say months, I mean like cumulative time watching
Yeah.
over the years, right? And meanwhile, you speak to someone for 2 seconds and you think because they like Joe Biden or because they like Donald Trump, that now they don't want their kids to have a safe environment to be raised in, or to go to have a good education or have a safe upbringing, and have good safe streets to live in,
Yeah.
good health care. Everyone wants good health care, like, so it's always the approach that's the issue, but it's this quick trigger. There's like this instant, let me associate that one quick thing with the repetitive, the
Sure.
information that's in my RAM, right? And now it's just cycling of this evil cycle. And the second you trigger it, now you're in that evil cycle, and it enrages me. And I think there's a feedback loop there.
But
Where,
that's back to the
yeah,
labels we were talking about, right?
yeah,
If you come in and you see someone and you have the label on them, you do just what you said. I
that's
sat
right.
and had thousands of conversations this summer with people who you could look at them and see what their label was, like the shirt they were wearing, right? Like, I mean, an example of it couldn't have been more interestingly aligned in that. And I talk about a conversation I had in Victor, Montana, with a woman who had a t-shirt stand at a town fair that sold every Trump, MAGA, aggressive t-shirt you can imagine. And I can contrast that with a young man working in a t-shirt shop in Omaha, Nebraska, that would sell every libtard, liberal, aggressive, in-your-face messaging t-shirts, and had similar subjective conversations with both, each of whom had very thoughtful reasons for why they were selling those t-shirts, but were not applying that to anyone that they met directly, right? In the same way, right? So the gentleman in Omaha is like, look, part of what I think is good about our t-shirts is, and I see people, and people come in who have different political views, and we have a real conversation because the t-shirt sparks the conversation. And vice versa, when people want me wearing a MAGA t-shirt, like he's like, I'll have a conversation, and I might be in, and he might be in one of the aggressive, liberal t-shirts. He's like, we talk to each other because it's almost like we see what the badge, and we actually are curious, and it tells us to do. He's like, interesting. Something similar this woman in Montana said, and she said, look, because I asked her, I said, look, it seems to me, and I asked her what unity means to her. Are we more unified? How does she do this? And if you listen to her answers, I was like, without judging right or wrong, your answers of how you interact with and perceive and want to perceive other Americans contradict the messaging of what you're selling. How do you reconcile that? And the messaging that said, I think we would agree that Donald Trump never before, currently, nor in the future is going to be putting that hand out and trying to build those bridges together. So I agree with you 100% is not doing that. So I said, how do you reconcile that? And she said, look, you're right. These are aggressive, but we need to be heard. We haven't been heard for so long. Sometimes you have to be aggressive to get heard, to have the discussion. Same thing. The kid in Omaha was saying to me the exact same thing, but both of them were talking to people who viewed differently and weren't coming in guns a-blazing in that conversation. When it was direct, when it was
Right,
amorphous and a label, challenge, problem, right? And so I think
right,
that's what we have to work through.
right. Yeah, and both can have their. I've looked at this. Even the most difficult issues, the ones that people generally, you know, I say, if 50% of the people, or 60-40, it doesn't matter. Whatever if it's somewhere in the middle, the the chances are it's not a simple problem. It's probably a deeply philosophical problem, or something very, embedded in bureaucracy or
Right.
something like that. That's just, but it's complicated. Everyone's like, oh, what do you mean? It's easy. Just flick the switch. And you're like, what? If it was that easy, we would have figured this out over thousands of years of
Right.
trying to understand democracy. We haven't figured it out yet because some things are still very complicated, right?
Sure.
Let's take abortion.
Mhm.
That's a fun one.
It's a fun one.
All right.
I
Let's
tried
take
not to
abortion.
talk about too much about this summer because, to your point, it's such an emotional and embedded issue for significant numbers of people. It's a very hard one to
It's
compromise on. But keep
very
going.
hard. It's very hard. And that's why, look, I have deeply, first of all, I try to have friends that think differently than me.
Mhm.
And I think
Agreed.
that's a good thing for people to do. Like, stop trying to always hang out with people who think be curious about good people who may just think differently than you on abortion or gun control or
Mhm.
anything complicated. And
Yep.
they're out there. Most of those people are just as good as you are, with a different
Yeah.
approach to
Yeah.
how they see right? Or they're getting different news. They're just a product of their news, right?
Right.
And their upbringing and the relationships they have and the people they feel like they let down if they voted for Biden instead of Trump, or the other way around, right?
Mhm.
Laura Forcum I've had on. She runs the Independent Center, talks a lot
I've
about that.
talked
It's
to
just
Laura a
like
bunch of times. Love Laura.
oh, great. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
wonderful. And she talks about, we did a lot on parenting and like this relationships and stuff,
Mhm.
about how deeply embedded people are in their own beliefs from relationships and from just their upbringing, and that their political beliefs are usually just products of that. Um,
Mhm.
and it's pretty remarkable, but, um, uh, yeah. So if you take abortion and say, look, I've tried to understand both sides deeply. I have my feelings on where I lean. I won't even call it a belief. I'm just going to say I lean in a direction, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
that's just how I feel based on all of those things. But I have asked people, and that direction for me is um, is pro-choice. I tend to lean on that side, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I can totally understand why someone would not agree with that,
Mhm.
right? And I actually think it makes total sense. And if I thought a little differently, or I had different parents, or I had different relationships, I can see that. I think that they value life so strongly at that level. A lot of these people, I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of the rationale for many of these people is how strongly they value life. And they just think it starts earlier. Whether you say it's not scientific, whether you say it's whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. That's just
Mhm.
their value and their come from, and they're coming from a good, wholesome place.
Mhm.
And sometimes I feel bad even for feeling the way I do about it. I'm like, maybe I should I don't know. It's complicated because it's deeply philosophical. And that's my point on like so many of these issues, where it's like, if people you can feel whatever way you want. Do it, don't do it. Let people believe and feel and take action the way they want. But if you approach it with a philosophical angle, and you approach it with, let me understand why you would feel that deeply about this thing. Listen,
Mhm.
like you said, and then empathize and say, wow, let me assume first you're a good person. Let me
Right.
not look at you as some MAGA person who just, Bible banging, religious, anti-abortion, then you can see that there's really beauty on both sides of it, actually. Even if you disagree, you could see it as beautiful, even
Mhm.
wholesomely. Wow,
Mhm.
I really appreciate where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
Not for me. That's okay.
Correct. Right. And I think, to that point, one question gets to the not for me statement you just made. Why does anyone get to put their belief system and their rules in a free country in which we have a separation of church and state on everyone else? Right? The answer is, you don't have to get an abortion. You don't have to support it. Why does your view dictate that someone who wants one can't? And vice versa. Why? I mean, no one who's pro-choice says you have to get an abortion. Obviously, that doesn't
Yeah.
even ring true. Why is the view that your belief is so profound that everyone else must have the same belief or the law must compel them to the same behavior is an interesting question, right?
Yep.
For
Hmm.
sure. On this one, I really believe that much more of the moral authority on this sits with the female. It's her body. But my wife, so knowing me very much pro-choice, has a very innovative solution that really is designed to get to the thinking. And I have had this conversation with a number of people on this topic who are very ardent pro, anti-abortion. Her, especially now with the technology she has, she says, look, the woman has to have the baby, carry the baby, and it changes her life profoundly forever, much more than potentially a man. It's like, here's the solution. Okay, I will agree abortion is illegal if we do the following. Every man, when they turn, pick your age, 14, 15, has to get a vasectomy. Every man. And that vasectomy cannot and will not be reversed until they show up with a woman with a signed contract that she agrees to potentially have a baby with this man. At which point, that vasectomy can be reversed and they can have their baby and as many as they want.
Yeah.
But then there's no
Interesting.
choice of, she's like, we have the technology. She's like, now you tell me in America, if white men and black men and yellow men and brown men are going to line up and agree to get their penises tied off. She's like, it's never going to happen. But they're going to tell me how to take care of my body. They're going to scream, it's my body. You can't do that to my body.
Yeah.
That's
No,
they're
it's a good
telling
argument.
me.
It's a good argument. It's a total good
very
argument.
and it's a very fair argument to get to what really then, because abortion touches a lot more issues than abortion. It gets to who's in control of whom's body, especially when it comes to health and wellness and go down the list.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
her point, that's why you marry smarter than you. Her point is, okay, let's equilibrate. Why is it always the female body that is being controlled, restricted, constrained, not the male body? Why is it that in Muslim countries, women must cover themselves because the men can't control themselves? Right, go down the list. And so this is, take away the religious arguments and the life or no life arguments of abortion and break it back to body, who's in control of what body. And we could be creative of how to try to solve the problem. But I think her thought is a very good discussion to
Yes.
try to get to the issues.
Yeah. But to that point, and she's using the latest technology where we are now. Abortion's been an issue for a very long time.
Sure.
Right. And it's been a religious, philosophical, moral conversation of what should be allowed. Taking the life versus the woman's rights. It's her body. All very good arguments. And I think that's my point, is that it doesn't even matter where you lean. It matters that you can see that it's just not. Some things are very complex.
Sure.
And this is one of those very hard things to say, oh, you're valuing these few moral foundations from even from Jonathan Haidt, right? Who puts, let's just say you have a tendency to lean on these moral foundations more than these moral foundations. And those are the things that you value more heavily. That doesn't, who's to say which one's better or worse? Sometimes it's easier than other times. And I think that's recognizing the world is not black and white. It's such a simple thing. This is such a cliche thing to say, but the world is not black and white and things are very complicated, and to appreciate the complexity of it.
Right.
Because then you can finally start talking about, these are the things we agree on. These are the things we don't. Let's find common ground. But if you think you're right, if the world has not figured out the problem to democracy in thousands of years, and you think you have a quick answer to fix democracy, I think I think it's a bit narcissistic, and I think it's not realistic. And it's why we're all working on this problem together. It's very hard.
And it's back to where we started, of getting out of your bubbles and having more direct human conversation interaction with a range of people, and obviously those different from you, because again, your experience, a person can be incredibly black or incredibly white on this issue of abortion, but now talk to people not only who have different views, but have had different impact. Hey, I almost died when pregnant XYZ, and an abortion saved my life. I mean, whatever that be.
Yeah,
If you're having that conversation, if this is what happened to me or my daughter or my sister or my friend, someone who's incredibly pro-abortion can sit there and say, I hadn't seen that or heard that. Maybe there is it isn't black and white, and I have to think about where are there compromises and exceptions and balance points, because you've got a woman's health, you've got a child's health, you've got all kinds of family repercussions, whatever it may be, and you've not thought about that because you haven't lived it, experienced it, heard of
that's
it.
right.
You start to change your view.
Yeah,
What we can't do is just be dug in, we're right, you're wrong. And
that's it.
people don't, and I say, as I talk to people this summer, they don't want to do that. But sometimes you're in those bubbles where it's a very big struggle to find people different than you. It was interesting. The areas where people think we're most divided as a country were the states that were the deepest of blue or the deepest of red. And the more purple, even light, call it pink or light blue states, people don't think we're as divided because they're talking to more people out of their bubbles. In deep red Montana or deep blue Massachusetts, many more people thought we were divided than when I was in New Jersey or even in Texas or in
Yeah,
Alabama, even, to be honest, right? So
yeah,
that was interesting as well, right? And the other place where you see a greater digging in of we're divided into positions is with wealth. The more wealth people have, the more they have the luxury of thinking they're right. They don't have to compromise because they don't need things in the same way. And so
right.
people are much more dug into their intellectual positions when they were, with greater wealth. And I mean, you have the luxury of actually having the debate and not compromising. Most people need to compromise. They need their government to work for them. They need help. They need support. They need this. They need that. They have to figure it out.
Yeah,
That's another interesting and I think underappreciated component of division is we have greater wealth inequality in America, and that allows for those with greater wealth to be much more dug into their views because
yes,
it's
and
a game.
and to protect their wealth and to vote for
Mhm.
policies that protect wealth.
Correct.
There's a few big differences that a lot of times I don't hear spoken about, and that's the difference between urban and rural, right?
Mm-hmm.
For
Yep.
right, almost every major city votes blue outside of exceptions in every state. San Antonio,
Mm-hmm.
Houston, Dallas, and uh, Austin all vote blue. Texas, red. Okay. So how do you reconcile that? We can reconcile it, but my point is, most of the time, it doesn't matter what state you live in. It matters how many big city centers you have that the people
Right.
start voting in a certain direction, right? So and the
Correct.
people outside those concentric circles of your city start moving in towards red bubbles. The other one is whether you own property or whether you
Mm-hmm.
don't own property, to your wealth
Right.
conversation. So
I'm finding a
like
quote while you're
people,
talking, so that's why I'm being a little distracted. Keep
oh,
going.
okay. Okay. So, if you own property, and even at the local level, you see this, it becomes really manifest around, at the local level where people start voting on things. Should those people live next to my house? Right? NIMBY-ish
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, let's put affordable housing unit next to my, multi-million-dollar, home. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing you're not talking about at these council meetings is like your motivation is to increase the value of their home. This does not do that. I don't hear that conversation a lot, but
Correct.
you're more right. And I'm like, okay, so just to your point about wealth, like you're motivated to increase and keep your wealth. And hopefully you
Sure.
do it in a way that is, we'll call it, I don't know, morally grounded, is sustainable, because how do you tell someone to not want to increase the value of the biggest investment of their life and vote for policies that support that, which may
Right.
lean them against some of the more, I don't know, things that support more working class people or poorer people, or, how do you do, and we're back to incentives.
Right. Well, and I think there's a couple things, right? I mean, 1,000%. One, two, I think a chunk of that starts in education. And one of the ways our education system has broken down is, do we require people to take ethics or morals classes in high school? Not anymore. We require them to take gym. We require them to take math and English. We require
Mm-hmm.
them to take home ec, or we require different things. But whether that's I mean, throughout the social hierarchy, from wealth to working class, where are morals and where are ethics, right? A lot of people do get them from the church, whatever church and whatever religion they're in. I mean, I think one of the really great things about religion is it often teaches morals and ethics, not always, and sometimes they're perverted, as we know, but part of what is missing, those debates don't happen because people haven't been taught about those concepts and have them as part of their day-to-day life. So that's a piece of it. And then I also think there's just, and it's sort of back to my wife's abortion point, there's a lack of creativity, intellectual curiosity and creativity to solve problems, right? Often the solutions to problems people come up with are constrained by what, this is what we've done before, right? What's completely out of the box ideas. And because that's where you can find solutions that bridge all these different gaps. NIMBYism, they're all true, but hey, part of, this is part of the conversation I have on economics today and on wealth inequality, whatever it is. The reason this country, people, and by the way, we're seeing it play out in the financial markets today. People have been as wealthy and as successful as America has been thought of as having the most stable democracy, the greatest rule of the law, the most transparent capital markets, the most non-governmental interference in capital markets, et cetera. American stock market had, over the last 10 years, its multiple expansion has been, American stocks traded between 6 and 10x higher PE multiple than European companies, same industry, same companies. View on growth, on all the things we just said. That ratio is already shrinking in light of the last 12 months of the chaos of our economic policies in the country, our significant deficits, our tariffs, all these different things. The multiples of stocks in Europe and in Asia are going up. The multiple of US stocks are flat to down. So we may not see that the multiple is lowering yet, but the multiple and the capital is shifting to other markets and other areas where there's more confidence in the rule of law, in innovation, and in sort of understandable and manageable and predictable government policy. Mm-hmm. So one of our biggest advantages is changing, right? And so I say to lots of people, as you think about wealth and your own wealth and what's in your best interest, if you vote for policies because you say, oh, in the short run, I'm going to get lower taxes or less regulated, this, that, the other thing, that's going to be great for me and I'm going to make more money. Maybe in the short run, but in the long run, will it still? Because the reason you're as wealthy as you are is go look at your stock portfolio and go look at your house value and go down those things. That has been driven by a view of American economic exceptionalism that the world is changing. It is the short America or move assets away from America has unquestionably what's going on. And in the long run, that may make you a lot less rich than the tax cut you got today. But sure, people struggle to think that way, to think in the long run. It's human nature, right? Like we all know.
Well, it's also very complicated. It's also that's such a complicated outlook, right? No economist can predict that perfectly. There's a million butterfly effect kind of things that in compounding variables that can get in the way of that. And someone could if I was on the administration's team or something, I would probably say, well, where do you get that data from? Let me look at that data source, try to understand the source of that data. And I'd probably have 10 things to say in response. Like, for example, look at all the new money that's coming in here of big factories and that are opening here from
that data doesn't support that statement, by the way. I mean, but the good news of what you and I are right now talking about is there is clear and objective data. I can look at the PE of the London Stock Exchange. I can go look at the PE of the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. I can go look at the PE of the Nikkei, and I can tell you what it was 5 years ago, 1 year ago, and today. And I can do the same with the S&P 500, right? I can tell you the dollar capital flows net in and net out of America or any other country. So like the good news in all this, this is the one area where there's clearly fact and data because it's just numbers. You can interpret it a lot of ways, but there's clearly data, right?
Yeah. But the interpretation and the extrapolation is everything. And that gets the news stories and that gets people going down different avenues. And even if all you have to do, this is my favorite thing, all you have to do is know a little bit more than someone else for them to think maybe you know what you're talking about. I remember, like,
Yeah,
I'm not a photographer, but I like photography. So one day I was at a wedding and someone asked me to take a picture, and I like got down on my knees and I took a photo because I saw like a good angle. Like, oh,
yeah,
this will be good. I forgot how it was. I stood by a rock, and they're like, oh, are you a photographer? And I was like, nope. I just know a little bit more about how to get a good shot than you do.
right,
Right.
right.
But the fact that and that's sort of this like basic level of just like people will get impressed with flat earth theories if they know nothing about physics at all or anything
Hmm.
about how the world works. That, you'd be like, oh, I
Right,
don't know how to compare that to any other data set that I have. So I take anything as fact.
right. There's a great quote. There's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics. And that's kind of what you're getting at. You can manipulate numbers and facts in any number of ways, right? To your point from the very beginning, what's a fact? We
Yeah.
might agree on a fact, but boy, can we manipulate it, or we can put four facts together in a very different way to reach to a different conclusion,
Sure.
whether purposeful or based on our knowledge and experience. And it's a belief. And then we get very blurry. Did I just have facts or do I have a belief?
Right.
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 Now it gets
And
complicated.
statistics are tricky too, because now it turns on the sample, the population size and the sample that you're collecting and whether you've
Hmm.
done, there's that, and whether or not you put this contextual narrative
Sure.
around it that makes it just get your point so you can win that grant funding and show that this data is
Right.
way more important than it really ought to represent. So I've seen a lot in the university level of
Hmm.
how grant money is scored and how
Yep.
people take data of research that they do and they put it around a compelling story. They get published. It doesn't mean the data is not good or that they didn't do good research. It just means that it's not the whole story.
Right. Right. And look to what we were just saying, back to the very beginning. For us United, what we're trying to do is change the culture so that we don't enter to that with the I'm right, I'm wrong. We enter to the culture of we want to teamwork, we want to cooperate, we want to respect each other, we want to listen, we want to hear, we want to be compassionate, we want to find ways to find common ground to build from there to solutions rather than find ways to
Right.
disagree. And that is
Right.
culture. That's before you get to any specific issue. Can people enter
Yeah.
that discussion with a different mindset
Yeah.
than, and that's really hard, but that's what we have to be able to do or nothing will change.
Yeah, and you've said this a number of times as well. You have to work on yourself first, right? You
Correct.
have to be willing to understand your own cognitive biases, which is
Right.
another, Daniel Kahneman. I don't know,
Yeah.
you know,
Like, of course.
like I mean, he's just once I read that book, I was like, how do I even trust my own thoughts anymore? Because there's just so many levels. You can have thoughts and opinions and beliefs, but you should, okay, let's start with which filter is this going through before it
Hmm.
becomes, right, my belief and why. So,
Right.
I almost like, it's like encouraging everyone to really do a deep analysis of just why they think about anything the way they think about it and know that everyone's different. It doesn't make them
So let's
bad.
go there. I know we're running out of time, but so as we mentioned, so last
I
week,
got a few more. Can you go a few more minutes?
yeah. So
Okay.
last week, I spent an entire week at a place called the Hoffman Institute. It's gotten to be well known. A couple of people, celebrities have talked about it on Oprah's podcast. And it is an incredibly unique place that focuses on helping you identify, understand, and break the negative, they call negative love syndrome, but negative patterns that you internalized from your parents from birth till throughout your life. And again, that not bad, but we all bring and learn. It starts with as a child, the way you keep safe and the way you get your parents' attention is to emulate them, their behavior, and that may be good or bad things, but you build your patterns based upon what you've learned from your parents, and they become literally ingrained in your brain. They're neural pathways that drive your behavior, and trying to change those and release those to be to your true self is incredibly hard. And so the Hoffman process is all about helping you do that. It's not saying right nor wrong. It's helping you be your true self. And at your true self, you're not about right and wrong, and you're not about ego, and you are much more about compassion and joy and positive energy. How do you get there? And
Yeah.
to get to that's, and it's a level of awareness and consciousness that we all need more of. And it gets back to my statement of you can't be a unifier, and whatever that might mean to you, if you don't start with yourself. If you're angry, you're unhappy with yourself, with the world, with others, with whatever that may be, really hard to connect with another human, right? Really hard, because you're not open, you're not putting positive energy out there, you're not putting your best self forward.
Yeah.
That's where you walk in and
It's
say,
like
I'm going
walking
to tell
around
you
with
why
it.
I'm right.
It's like walking around with an angry face and then
Right.
expecting everyone else to smile at you and say hello.
Correct. And not everyone is going to go do what I just did for a week, which is 100+ hours of incredible, 14, 15 hours a day of intense self-work and analysis. And
Yeah.
it was in a group session, but 1,000%, I'm a different human being today than I was 10 days ago when I left. 1,000%. Things that the simplest I said is my whole life, I've always had really tight back, neck, shoulders. And I always thought that was stress, right? That's where I carry my stress. Day 3, I woke up gone. Like I was being choked by my own anger and feeling of lack of safety that comes back to my childhood. Lots of things. I'm not going to go into all of them, but it was like air. I'd always had that feeling. I didn't know any different. I didn't know there was another way because it was attached to me, and there was anger caught up in so many things with my parents and growing up and a thousand. They helped me process and ultimately release some of that. I literally physically woke up feeling different. So imagine you're me, you're walking through the world every day and you're tight and your neck hurts. It's like you're being choked. How are you going to be kind and communicate? Forget about unity, forget about anything. How are you going to be kind to yourself, to your
Sure.
spouse, to your children? You might be by power of your mind to try to make you that way, but then you get into stressful situations, you get into triggers, that goes out the window. And so for me, everyone's different, but that was for me, right? You have to be willing to look at those things and work on it. And if more people would do just a little of that, we would find common ground, because you would come into these conversations and meeting new people from a very different place.
Yeah.
Very different.
Absolutely. Maybe from a place of curiosity or inquisition.
Yes, that's an important
being
word,
inquisitive.
curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah. The world's very, you get a lot of that when you travel, right? When you
Mhm.
travel to lots of places and you're like, wow, somewhere entirely outside of this, go spend a
Right.
month in, Southeast Asia, pick city, whatever, and go see that people who don't have even Christian values,
Right.
right?
But you don't even have to
Start.
do that. But to your point, there were so many people I met this summer who, had never left Iowa or Montana or, you can't help it I grew up in New Jersey. You have to leave New Jersey. It's just not that big, right? You can go to Pennsylvania, but you could, if we could find ways and there are people of not-for-profits who do this, especially with kids in high school, to say a program where for a week or two, we're going to get you out of whatever it is. If you have spent your whole life and never really left Montana, go spend 2 weeks in New York City. And if you're a kid who grew up in New York City with privilege and you've never spent 2 weeks, and not Montana at the fancy dude ranch on the horse and all that, Montana in the real world, or basically anywhere that you think of as a flyover state in this pejorative sense of,
Yep.
elites will say, go spend 2 weeks there. You don't have to go to Thailand. You don't have to go to Argentina for difference.
Right.
Just go to some
Sure.
different places in America. And
Yeah.
you start to realize there's gray. And you start to see different perspectives, back to what we were saying. Like, that's important, because you're not going to get that on television. You're not.
Yeah.
Even with the best of intentions, you're not. And you're not going to get it on Instagram or TikTok, because people are presenting their fake best life, not the real life.
Right.
Go spend time with real people.
It
Just
just
do
doesn't
that.
sell. How do we get that to sell? How do you get that stuff? Cat out of the tree, people getting along. There's gray area. How do you get that stuff to sell? News has always been about the top headline of something
Yeah,
dramatic and bloody. Like, how do we get that to sell
I
to
got
the
two ways for
media?
you.
I
I got
know
two
you
ways
do.
of what we're doing. I mean, one is, we have this unity pledge you can take on our social media and our website. Great, do that, fine. What do you do with it? And what we say is help change the algorithm. What if once a week you post, and every American one day posts one thing they do or they see in their community where someone else is building community, helping someone, doing something supportive, kind, building that bridge. If every one of us posted that once a week, we just change the social media algorithms, and the stories that we all see on social will be different. And then, by the way, the news is going to cover, the traditional media is going to cover that and say, the change the algorithm movement in America.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you say it's possible, and you see different behavior and stories. So that's one. Another thing
Wait, let
we're
me add
doing
one
is,
piece on that. I'm going to add one piece on that.
yeah,
We should target the people who are the most extreme, who do most of the posting, because most people are voyeurs, right? So
Mhm.
target those people to say, you extreme people putting out all that stuff should post one nice thing a week. And I think
but
maybe that would
everybody,
accelerate it. Everybody,
yeah,
yes.
yes, but
Yeah,
because this is a law of numbers that changes the algorithm, right? Not individuals. And that's like, because part of what I often heard from people is, what am I going to do about this? I'm not the president. I'm not the governor. I'm not famous. I'm just a man or woman. I
right.
go to,
For everyone to get involved. Sure.
right. That's it. If that were true, then your vote wouldn't matter either. If we all did something like this, and it takes 2 minutes a week for you to post one good story, change it.
Yep.
That's one. Two, what does still unify Americans? And right, think about that. What still you think unifies us?
What, the belief that in general the system works.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
In general, it does work. Your kids go to school. Most people have kids go to school for free, and the streets are, they have locks on their doors or whatever. I don't know. They get the basic services. Their roads get generally paved. The lights work on the freeway. I don't know.
I was going a little more general, but
Oh, okay.
sports unify us, right?
Oh,
Music unifies us.
okay.
Golden retrievers, food, two things. So, but let's focus on sports and music too. One of the things we're doing at Us United, we are having unity seats at major sporting events. And eventually, why not every sporting event has 6 seats set aside? We work with our local sheriff and our sheriff unity network. With us, identified 2 groups of 2 people from their community who don't know each other and just seem different, whatever that means. Like people, we're different. Like different part of this seems different. Could be one person lives north, one person lives south in the city, whatever it may be. Put them in the unity seats. They don't know each other, cheering for the same team. Maybe they're rivals. Like I could have,
Mm-hmm. I
right?
see.
Whatever it may be, on the Jumbotron and say, today in the unity seats, we have Evan and, you know, your son, your friend, and you have Adam and his daughter, friend, whatever. They don't know each other. We're together cheering for, I'm originally from New York, the Knicks, the Giants, whatever it may be, the Yankees. I got the Yankees behind me. I'm a big Yankee fan. At the end, we don't know each other. At the end of that game, we're friends, right? We are, because we have something in common that we built a bond over. And for 2 to 3 hours, did we talk about other things? Yeah, we did. Maybe we didn't get to abortion. Maybe not in the first game, but we got to things that we might otherwise disagree upon. And I'm listening to Evan saying, wow, I never thought about that. That's interesting. And go whatever. And at the end, the point being, we talked to you before, during, and after. And what you see is that evolution of this is how you find common ground. And you're being rewarded for unity. Unity, I was sitting
I love
courtside
that.
to see the Knicks. Division, I'm at home watching TV alone. Now I'm
Yeah.
changing culture. Here's how unity is being rewarded, being promoted, and saying this is a good thing. And then good things happen from it.
Yeah.
And the next thing and the next thing. And then I've got LeBron talking about it, and I've got Tom Brady talking about it, and I've got, it doesn't matter whom. I got Jack Hughes
Great.
talking about it.
Very clever. Very
So
clever. That's
those are things that we can do that change the culture, but say, this is what unity looks like. it's going to get covered. And now we can, and it becomes real like, hey, I could do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway.
You're using, it's funny, that's sort of like the common enemy approach, right? Like Independence Day with Will Smith.
Yeah.
Like the whole world comes together to fight the aliens. It's
Yeah.
like there's a little bit of like, hey, we're both here, but we'll call it, light version light of that, right? But it's like we're both here supporting the same team. We both want to see this team win, and we will use that. That's the forefront of this conversation and the relationship we're going to build, and the rest becomes
Yeah.
secondary. Wasn't there like a Heineken commercial once where they like sat around
Yes.
and shared?
7 or 8 years
Right?
ago with people who were like who didn't know, like someone's like, I don't like gay people, and he was talking to someone gay and didn't know it or whatever that
Oh,
may
right,
be.
right.
It was
I
fabulous.
thought
That's right. That's right. But those are
it's a
things we
good,
can do.
we got to call Heineken, get them back in the game here.
I'm working on it.
Call Will Smith. Maybe he'll help with
Yeah.
fighting the
Yeah.
aliens. This was a great conversation. I could keep going. I actually have more questions, but I want to respect our time for today.
I'll come back another time.
This was awesome. Thanks for all you do, the great work you're doing. It's so needed, and I'm so on board with what you're building. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me, and it was super fun to talk about all these things.
Pleasure, sir. Take care.